There are some rules to remember when you're solving for net force. Those rules are, if the forces are acting in the same direction, then you add. If the forces are acting in the opposite direction, then you subtract. So some examples of same direction would be, let's say that there's a circle in the middle, and we got two forces pushing and pulling that way, or we could have it go in the opposite direction, but the forces acting upon that object are going in the same direction. For opposite directions, well, you guys can probably imagine that we would have the arrows going in opposite directions, either inward or outward. All right, so let's actually look at some examples. So let's say we have this box, and this is a magical world where friction doesn't exist. If we have a force that is pushing the box to the right, and it's pushing it at 50 newtons, and we have a force pulling the box to the right on the other side, and this time it's going at 30 newtons. Because the arrows are pointing in the same direction, we would say that this object net force was 80 newtons to the right. You always have to include the arrow. To look at another example going the other way, if we had a force pulling it this way at 10 newtons and a force pulling it or pushing it that way at 5 newtons, we would add those together because they're going in the same direction. So we would have 15 newtons, and this time the arrow would be pointing that way. Let's look at an example of opposite direction. So if we have a force pushing on the box with 20 newtons, this direction, and we have another force pushing with 30 newtons. Because these arrows are going in opposite directions, you need to subtract. So 30 minus 20 is 10 newtons. Now remember from the previous example, we always had to include the arrow. Because this is the bigger number, the box would get pushed to the left. So we would say 10 newtons to the left. Looking at another example of this, let's say we had a force pulling the box, a little tug of war going on, and let's say it's 5 newtons that way, and we had another force pulling the box that directions, and it was 3 newtons. Well, again, because they're going in opposite directions, we'll subtract. 5 minus 3 is 2 newtons. But which direction will the box go? You gotta look at which side is bigger. Because that 5 newtons is bigger, it's gonna win, so the box is gonna go 2 newtons to the left.